The Health Foundation reports that 1 in 3 young adults aged 18-24 report symptoms like anxiety or depression, rising to 41% for women. How is the status of young adults today, and how does university correlate with the problem? Let's review the state of mental health today. A recent survey from Gallup has highlighted a general increase in negative emotions worldwide since 2006, including stress, anger, sadness, worry, and physical pain. In 2023, the US Surgeon General, which is the operational head of the United States Public Health Service Commissioned Corps, raised an alarm about an epidemic of loneliness. Marthy wrote, "People began to tell me they felt isolated, invisible, and insignificant." The stats find correspondence in a survey from the prior group, suggesting that the number of women in the 16-24 age range committing self-harm has tripled since 1996. But while scientific articles often highlight an increase in mental health problems like depression, anxiety, and panic attacks, particularly for women, the lower levels of mental health burden reported for men may be due to potential stigma, inducing men to not seek help or openly report their struggles. If we look at the data, indeed, we can see that the Whiskers database on fatal injuries shows that suicides have increased in the United States since 2007, mostly for the younger population aged 20-39. And this is particularly true for young men aged 20-29, who represent a bigger trend in suicides in the States today. Multiple studies suggest that people in higher education may encounter higher levels of mental health issues compared to the general population, such as social anxiety, depression, panic attacks, eating disorders, etc. Financial problems and academic achievement seem to be major factors. The Mental Health Foundation highlights a number of potential causes, such as skipping meals or overworking, accommodation issues with toxic or abusive flatmates, having to make difficult decisions, and pressure and expectations. If we look at their references, they report that 3/4 of lifetime cases for disorders like anxiety, mood, or impulse control are developed by the age of 24. The problem seems to be accentuated in musical and artistic universities, where students reported higher rates of anxiety and depression, likely due to hyper-competition in the sector. This is probably not very surprising, if we consider that we worship Van Gogh partly because he cut off his ear, which adds detail to that fascinating stereotype of the unregulated artist and pure genius today. For students who start a PhD, mental health conditions seem to worsen considerably, including feelings of anxiety, depression, loneliness, and isolation. This article by Bergvall et al. Compared psychiatric medication consumption in Sweden for 20,000 doctoral students before and after beginning their PhD, highlighting a 40% decrease in medication after their start, with a peak 5 years after commencing. If we look at the population of professors, it is worth mentioning this study from Tifting et al., which highlights that narcissism rates increase with higher academic ranks, while self-esteem seems to decrease. This study alone would deserve a dedicated video, because there is super interesting information regarding research misbehavior in academia that I may cover in the future if you want. Be careful that this, however, does not mean that all professors are narcissists. It is worth noticing this paper by Wallace about the perception among students of narcissism in college professors, for whom this trait became an issue only when narcissism dimensions were associated with interpersonal hostility. I am also one of those who have experienced these kinds of mental issues. I am a whistleblower and I once had to report my boss to regain my right to do my research as planned, knowing that this is often a career killer. Research shows that 85% of whistleblowers suffer from severe to very severe anxiety, depression, interpersonal sensitivity, and others, so I know the issue firsthand. Overall, our data suggests that attending university has an effect on mental health. But part of it is probably not the fault of the university itself. I would categorize problems into two main trends. The first is the student life, which includes all those things surrounding the university. In particular, economic difficulties, specific events, stressors, and toxic relationships may play a strong role. Here, there is little the university can do. Maybe we could question whether we have transformed education from a place to learn into a place to compete. The second is expectations and self-expectations. Maybe you grew up feeling that this is what people expect from you in life and they expect you to succeed always. It is possible indeed that we may have created through family and social media a world in which self-expectations has increased to extreme standards. Here there is perhaps something more that academia can do by cultivating an environment with less advertising and more realistic expectations. On a personal level, I was recently asking myself what wars and situationships have in common. One thing may be the lack of accountability, which is becoming a buzzword today, from governments to the workplace and relationships. But if I think about it, it seems to me that we are more and more afraid that in this consumerist economy, we have become disposable assets with no human value to be used and discarded. I don't know if this is the right reading, so let me know in the comments what you think. Another example is the increase in bullying in the workplace that some researchers are reporting. This feeling of being a number, an object, is also in line with the comment from the chief of the US Surgeon General when he stated people began to tell me they felt isolated, invisible, and insignificant. And for this reason, we may constantly look for validation somehow. However, irrespective of the academic sector, the data shows that there has been a general drop in the mental well-being of young adults at a societal level, with an increase in suicides among people aged 20-39. This can be due to many reasons, including a general distrust toward the future. I feel that many of us are developing a "for what" attitude, as if in the end all this effort is not really worth it. This can explain why, for example, recent studies show that workers may be less and less interested in taking promotions associated with high stress roles and responsibility, or the critique of young adults to be lazy in the workplace. I would then mention the last factor that covers the workplace in general, including the university environment. Those people who want to make your life more complicated than it already is, for no clear reason, perhaps capitalizing on their rank to complicate things unnecessarily. As I showed before, some researchers have pointed to an increase in bullying today. Fortunately, I believe that the academic sector is starting to address this problem more and more seriously. Overall, the good news is that universities are slowly starting to react by issuing urgent calls to action to counter this mental health crisis. However, my fear is that trying to solve the problem may signify for some the creation of specific policies to marginalize the symptoms rather than actually solving the causes, bringing, for example, more psychological counseling, etc., which is good. But as we saw, this trend is first of all systemic. The spike in suicides that we discussed before is particularly concerning because young adults now exceed older people in these statistics. And these tell us that young people probably don't like living in the world we have created. I believe that the academic world and the humanities in particular, from arts and culture to the economy and politics, should probably discuss this honestly and take accountability, because this is also a result of years of research, theories and policies which have led to the creation of the world that we are living in today. On this topic, I suggest you watch my video on rethinking cultural research. This is what I have for you today. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you again in the next video.